Welcome to Growing Up the Age of Your Emotions podcast. I'm Dr. Melanie Empowers, and today we're stepping into a space every leader knows well, the fog. Those seasons when the path ahead is blurry, the answers aren't obvious, and the weight of responsibility feels heavier because clarity is missing. This is where emotional age shows itself, not in how much you know, but in how you navigate what you don't know. We hope you enjoy this episode of Growing Up the Age of Your Emotions. Today, our guest is someone who has a wealth of leadership experience and understands what leading through the fog is like. Welcome, Christina Cage, Director of Consumer Lending Products and Experience in the Financial Technical Industry. Welcome, Christina. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Melody, for having me on the podcast. I'll say that first, I'm excited about what you're doing. Love the topics that you've already established here. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Well, good. Well, we'll start out with asking questions and having a conversation. How do you communicate with your team when you don't have clear answers?
Okay, so I think that first of all, I think you did a really great job of, giving me an introduction. I think it's important as we talk through how I approach leadership and thinking about fog to just mention a little bit about my experience and what I do. So I currently lead consumer lending products and experiences in a financial institution. So my career has spanned from sales to e-commerce, user experience, fintech, and loyalty and payments, and now product management. But if there's one thread that connects all of it, I've always been fascinated about human behavior. So when I look back on my career, I think, it makes perfect sense. Living through it didn't at the time. At the time, it looked like sales and then e-commerce, then UX, and then fintech, and now product. But looking back on it, every role was really about asking the same question, why do people make the decisions that they make? And that's so important when you think about, the roles that you've done and translating over to leadership. Understanding people matters. Being able to listen to the signals, if you will, can really detect, how you deal and work with people in a leadership perspective. And so, when I started in sales, that was really important to just, understanding what products people want. How do you connect the dots for them so they can know that this is the thing I need to buy? You also need buy-in when it comes to leadership. You need to be able to lead people in a way that makes them feel good, but also to be able to give them critical feedback in moments that matter once you've, established that trust. So I would say starting in sales and then, that curiosity led me over into e-commerce and then digital experiences where I became more fascinated with customer behavior, if you will. Why do people click on something? Why do they navigate through a website and then leave it in a cart? What helps them convert faster? What, brings friction throughout the experience? And as digital channels became more sophisticated, I became more obsessed with understanding behavior at scale. Starting with heat mapping tools, click paths, conversion rates. I see something going off. Conversion rates, spending patterns, loyalty engagement. And not because I love dashboards, if you will, but because I love people and what it reveals in people. And so I would say, combining all the things that I've done, which is really focused on, who are people? What do they like doing? Why are certain things important to them? Has translated over into my leadership style, if you will. So I know that kind of went off on a tangent, but when I think about, draw me back to your question that you had on fall, I think it was.
Well, I was asking how do you communicate with your team when you're not even
Mhm.
clear? When
Yep.
you don't even really know, like you can't see the full path. How do you guide your team through that?
Yeah, I say, when I think about guiding people through a path, and I know the topic is leading through fog, for me, when I think about leading through fog, I don't actually think about uncertainty, if you will. I think I talked about it a little bit earlier. I think about signals. Earlier in my career, I thought leadership was about having all the answers. I thought the best leaders were the ones that walked into a room, knew immediately what to do. But the longer I worked in product, and the longer I've been a leader, the more I realize that's rarely how leadership works. It's about, again, recognizing the signals. Customers leave signals, employees leave signals, markets leave signals, data leaves signals. And so for me, it's important to just let everybody know, these are the signals that I'm seeing. I know that you want to do this project. You think this thing matters, but it's really saying the customer doesn't want this. And so oftentimes when you're leading people, when I don't know all the answers, it is let's not start always with ourselves and think, this is what we think the problem it is. It is let's look at the research. Let's look at what people are saying that they want. And let's make the work meaningful for the customers rather than meaningful for ourselves. And so that's what I like to do is, get together with the team. I'm uncertain. I think this is the problem we need to solve. I think this is the way that we need to do it. But the data is telling us this thing. So let's design for people and not for ourselves. And so I like to collaborate a lot with my team,
Hmm.
to always say, let's solve this thing together. That's super important. And it helps build trust too, to say out loud to employees, I don't know the answer, but let's figure it out together. And that has worked well for me.
Right. So you mentioned a few things that I believe are key to being a successful, positive leader, and one was trust. And the other that I heard was collaborate, and then also you engage the team. You bring them in, help them. You don't make the decisions for them. You work with them to make the decision for the team
Hmm. Hmm.
as a whole, which is
Yeah.
something that a lot of leaders don't do. Some of them do. I'm not saying all leaders don't do that, but there's some who feel like I'm responsible, so I have to tell them what to do versus I'm part of this team too. We're going to work
Yeah.
this out together. If we're not really
Yeah.
sure, we're going to figure it out. We're going to do the research, look at the data, look at whatever facets are applicable to whatever the job is or whatever the activity or task at hand is. And you figure it out together and you have to trust each other. They have to trust you because
Yeah.
if you
Trust is
don't know
huge.
and
Yeah.
you're
Exactly.
not if they can't trust you, then how are they going to trust that they know what they're doing? And then they people take things personal. They feel responsible for the job that they're doing. You being their leader, they're not going to think that, oh, well, because she didn't know then it's not on me. No, they're going to think, oh, it's on me because I should have known. So
Yeah,
working with them, like
yeah,
you're
that's
saying,
huge.
right?
That's huge. And it took me a while to learn that. I think, when I first, I'll say became a manager, right? Because there's a difference between being a manager and a leader. When I first became a manager, I really focused on, and not to say this the wrong way to do it, but I really focused on, I need to figure out how this person works. I need to figure out what they need, how I can help develop them, how I can help them grow. And then it took me a while to figure out, no, I need to focus first on me. Let's focus
Yeah,
on it sounds a little, opposite of what you should be doing, but it is, I need to become more self-aware to first figure out what are my defaults?
yeah,
When do I show up as my best self? And that translates to being a good leader. So for me, I know that I like to do a lot of deep thinking and thoughtful work early in the morning. So I try to protect those first 2 hours of the day. If I can do that successfully, I can be a better leader throughout the day. When I first became a manager, I would allow people to set up meetings with me whenever they wanted to, and I'll be overwhelmed in the morning, which is my deep thought work. It's when I might be doing designing wire flows or when I need to write a strategy document. Those things, in order for them to be the best, need to be done in the morning. And I also tend to block off Fridays as my deep thoughtful work. So I figured out how to get into my rhythm. And then I would share that out with people. And so the past two roles I sent out when I started day one to my direct reports, I sent out a Christina's operating system. And it literally was these are the top 10 things you should know about me. This is how I work my best. These are the things that matter to me. I'm a mom first, so I try to protect the pickup time with my school, with my kids' school. So if you try to schedule a meeting with me in between these times, you're going to get an auto decline because I like to protect the moment when I'm riding with him and hear what's going on with his day. And so I figured out that that was really important. First is self-awareness, understanding who you are, how you like to work, when are you your best self, and then to share that out with your direct reports. because
Right.
that lets them know, this is who I'm interacting with. And
Right.
when you do that at the beginning of, I'll say day one in leadership, it helps set a good framework for, how you'll work best together. To say that I can collaborate with her because she's first shared with me who she is, how she likes to
Mhm.
work. And then I also ask for them to share that back with me too. So we figure out, okay, let's solve these problems together. I'm all about togetherness, but it took me a while to figure that out, like to figure that out
Right.
in leadership. And so I think got a pretty good rhythm now. So again, when it comes to problem solving, I like to say, because we're not trying to solve the problem for ourselves, we're trying to solve it for customers. So this is the problem we're trying to solve. I have this way of thinking, you have this way of thinking. Let's bridge it together so that we can problem solve at scale. And so,
Right.
yeah, I agree with all the things that you're saying.
Yeah, and
Collaboration is
that's
huge.
that's true because we were in another episode we were talking about leading and getting to know your team, but first you have to know yourself. Like you have to know you
Huge.
in order for you to be able to bring that to them. Like, hey,
Mm-hmm,
this is who I am. And then that also makes them feel safe. That's their psychological safety, the
mm-hmm.
trust that people need so that they can bring their best selves into the situation. So, having those 10 things that you shared with them about you, that probably made them feel a little vulnerable and say, well,
Yeah,
I can share things with her. She told me, and wow, she picks her kid up. So if I need to go pick my kid up, then
yeah.
I could go pick my kid up from school and, get back online or,
Yeah, because
whatever the
and you
situation
mentioned that's
is.
what
So
you
that's,
mentioned, right? That psychological safety, that's
yeah,
huge because we're human first. We're human first. And so if
right.
someone feels like they can that they're safe, that they can share who they are, and it helps at least you be able to shine the light into why they think the way they think, how they're operating in that day. If I know that someone's going to be thinking, oh, I got to go pick up my kid from school super fast and I might not want to schedule a meeting with them 30 minutes before, right? Because they're not going to be super focused on the problem we're trying to solve. And so all those things matter in
Right.
leadership, but just, allowing people to share who they are. No judgment
Yeah.
behind it. I say listen and don't judge. They're
Yeah.
sharing something vulnerable, which is this is who I am. These are the
Right.
things that matter to me. This is why I work this way. Once you know that up front, I think it just makes things easier.
Yeah.
To start off with. So yeah,
Yeah. And then they can also trust, like you get more respect and people want to give more when they know that you support their work-life balance. You shared
exactly.
your work-life balance. I have to
Yeah.
go pick my son up from school or
Hmm.
I have things that I need to do. Don't schedule anything during this block of time.
Yeah.
They feel the same way. I got to pick my kid up, but I can get back online. A lot of people do
Hmm.
that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's important to allow people to have that work-life balance so that they can be the best employee or team member that they can be as
Yeah.
part of your leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my
Agree.
my next question for you is
Okay.
when you think about leading through the fog,
Hmm.
what images or emotions come to mind for you as a leader?
The images are emotions. I think, it's a theme of what we talked about before, which was, you know, looking at signals and a lot of emotions. There is this idea of fog being, I'll say, uncertainty.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think, from a leadership perspective, we try to spend a lot of time eliminating uncertainty. But I don't think uncertainty is really the problem to solve, if you will. I think it's a condition that you have to navigate in, as an example. So, every
Okay.
meaningful thing I've done professionally with uncertainty, whether it's been a promotion, a career move, a major initiative, the reality has been that certainty is often a luxury that's only available hindsight. Like if I knew this, I would have did that. But when people look at successful companies or successful products or successful leaders, they assume that the path was obvious. And I'll say, it wasn't. The path became obvious after the outcome. And so for me, I think going through it, You're like, oh, I don't know if I should make this decision, or analysis by paralysis. I need more information before I make a decision. Um, but and those emotions, I would say, are good because emotions are signals. They tell you, and over time, once you start solving a lot of problems, you get faster, that intuition kicks in. You're like, oh, I've seen this before. It's a different problem, but same, kind of situation. So I'll say going through it, emotions, there's a little bit of anxiety of, I don't know if I should make the right decision, especially when there are people and money on the line. Um, but I think, over time for me, it's, the road's not clear. I can't see, but let's look for the next stop, is what I've said. It's
Hmm.
kind of like driving. If you're driving in the rain, it's a ton of rain pouring down. I'm not trying to see the very end of the street. I'm like, I'm just looking a couple of meters ahead and then waiting for it. If something jumps out, then I might need to stop. But for me, it's been, just let's look at the next mile
Yeah.
and then make a decision there. And so I always say slow down to speed up. And I think that's really the same approach I think about fog. It is, I know I can't see to the end, so let me not try or get frustrated. Let's just focus on seeing what's ahead. Hopefully that answered your question, but
Yeah, because you have
really
an
mixed emotions.
idea. You
Hmm.
have a idea of what it might look like, but you still, like you said, I can't see at the end of the road because there's fog there. So I'm just looking at what's in front of me and I'm going to keep moving
Yep,
in the
and that's the
direction.
key. You gotta keep moving.
Right.
Sometimes people see flog and won't do anything. I'm like, don't just stay sit because or wait till the weather is perfect. That's another thing. I'm like, no, 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 I gotta drive. I'm in this car
Right.
now. I gotta drive. I can't just sit in the
Right.
driveway. But there might be more caution because there is fog. It doesn't mean I need to speed up.
Mm.
It means, go slow, look for the next signal, then make a decision, and then keep driving. And I think, sometimes people, because there is fog, they won't make a decision, and that's just not helpful, for anybody.
Right. Right. So the next two questions, that's the good segue into the next two questions. You mentioned data before, and you said that you would collaborate with your team to
Hmm.
let's look at the data when
Hmm.
there may be something that you have to solve for as a team. So how do you balance intuition with data when neither
Mm.
feels fully reliable?
Let's see. I think this is probably one of my favorite topics. And I'll say because people frame it as a either or decision.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's not. Example, like I love data. I've built much of my career around data informed decision making. But I've also learned that, data is again like the rear view mirror, if you would, something that already happened. It tells us what happened. It doesn't always tell us why. And it really tells us what's possible. I would say earlier in my career, I became again fascinated with heat mapping tools and behavior analytics. And I remember a team spending weeks debating like a particular feature. Everyone had
Mm.
opinions, everyone had theories. Then we looked at the heat maps, and customers actually were not interacting with the thing that they said we should build. They were confused by it. They weren't using it. They weren't even seeing it. We spent weeks debating something customers didn't even care about. And I would say the way that you balance that is when you think about, this is something that I think people want. But then if you can drill down in data, say, nope, there's a heat mapping tool that says people aren't actually hovering over this thing. So we spent weeks on this opinions of what we thought mattered, and like, nope, nobody's buying that thing, and actually nobody's even looking at that page.
Mm.
So we've spent a ton of weeks thinking about, this is what we think people want. Um, and so I'm like, no, let's actually go see what people want. And I think that's the balance of saying, um, data could be telling you something. Our intuition is saying we should do something else, but it's the balance between the two. It's not always a either or. It's taking a look at, my intuition might say, I think this is a problem I need to go solve. But then the data might say, nope, don't even spend your time there. And then it could be another thing. The data might be bubbling up something that's really big where your intuition was just saying, no, people don't care about that. So I would say it's never either or. Sometimes it's just mixing the two of, looking at data, looking at intuition. But intuition is a signal too. Intuition can say, I think I need to be solving for this. Let's go see if the data can also support that as well. So
Right.
they work well together.
Yeah, so they complement
Hmm.
each other. So the next question is, what does a good decision look like when the outcome is unknowable?
What does a good decision look like? The outcome is knowable. Oh, give me more there. Let me think about that.
So when you think about the going through the fog and you're taking it, one step at a time, but you
Hmm.
know
Hmm.
that there's an end there, but you're not really sure because
Okay.
there may
Yeah.
have been new developments. There may be new data that may have come in, just a lot of different variables that
Hmm.
bring more uncertainty. You have the fog, there's the road, you have the fog, but then there's some other variables that I'm not really sure how to approach this because maybe you don't have all the data. Maybe you have some, and maybe you're trusting that that's enough, but you're not really sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so how would you proceed in a situation where you have everything you believe you need, but you're not really sure that you do in order to make it to that outcome that you desire?
Yeah, I think I will start with the way that I approach it is with a lot of questions before making a decision.
Hmm.
I like to be super thoughtful, if you will. Um, when it comes to anything, I would say, personally, professionally, or you're building something that's, does it align with your values? Just start with questions, right? Um, am I considering all the people that this would impact? Um, do I have the most information that I need available today to make this decision? I would say if the answers are yes to most of those, then for me, it's led to good decisions. And I think that's the best outcome. It is, did I ask all the right questions up front? If I feel like I said yes, then I think I'll have a good outcome based on the information that I know. So I would say that's probably the big thing of just starting with a lot of questions, making a decision based on the answers that you get, because you
Hmm.
don't always know what the outcome is going to be. Um, so
It's
I
a
would say that,
projection, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
all a projection. You don't
yeah.
know until it actually happens. You may have various levels of certainty that,
Hmm.
this will work because maybe we've done it before or the data supports this. I'm 99% sure that we're going to get there, but you still have that 1%
Yeah,
that
you're
would tell
always going
you
to have
that,
that one. Yep, yep. And it's based on, your risk tolerance. But yeah, you can only make a decision with the information that you have available to you. And
right,
so I think that the biggest thing is just, having your guidelines, your rule books of these are the questions that I need to ask to get the right amount of information to make this particular decision now, because things are going to change, right? And once those things change, you can make adjustments on the decision that you made. But I would say you're never going to have 100% of anything.
right.
So
Yeah,
that's
I
just the
mean,
reality.
that's impossible.
Hmm.
You may have, like I said, different levels of certainty because
Sure.
you've done this 100 times, and this is what usually happens, but still you don't know, maybe something different. For example, if you're driving through the fog, there's construction. Maybe you have to take a detour and you didn't know that they closed that exit
Yeah,
off
yeah.
the freeway.
You
So
gotta make a different decision.
yeah, it's like
Driving.
now I got to
Yeah,
make another decision. What do I do? So yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. When there are different things that pop up, I would say you got to pivot. Sometimes you just got to pivot.
Pivot.
This is the
Yeah.
thing I wanted to do. This is where I was trying to go. But when something new comes, you got to make adjustments, and that's important to always be flexible. Like just be flexible, be able to pivot quickly when it matters, or slow down when you should slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's whenever
So,
something new is introduced, you got to be able to make a decision based on that new information.
so what type of signals do you look for that tell you when it's time to pivot? Like, give an example of a time when you believed based on everything you had, all the data you collected, the information showed that, hey, this is, the direction, but then you had to pivot. Something told you had to pivot. Like, how do you know when you need to do what's a situation that you were in when you had to do that, when you had to change course?
Yeah, I would say I've changed courses a lot. I think, one a good one that's relevant, a good one that's relevant today. We can dive a little bit deep into technology. Is that, everybody's been talking about AI this, AI that. And so I would think a lot of folks today thought that I would say AI is a good thinking partner. And what's important is people are thinking about pivoting in their careers. They're thinking, oh, is
Mhm.
my job going to go away because AI will replace it? And there's a lot of that uncertainty and anxiety there. And I would say, well, let's figure out how you can inject AI into the work that you do today. And so I
Mhm.
think in whatever you're doing, in whatever role, pivot doesn't always mean change directions. It means let's just add something else to the mix sometimes. Like I didn't think I needed this, but because AI will replace it, and there's a lot of that uncertainty and anxiety there. And I would say, well, let's figure out how you can inject AI into the work that you do today. And so I
Mhm.
think in whatever you're doing, in whatever role, pivot doesn't always mean change directions. It means let's just add something else to the mix sometimes. Like I didn't think I needed this, but now I know that I do. An example for me is, I went through my undergrad, got my undergrad in public relations and pivoted, right? And so I thought I was going to be this amazing writer. And I think, storytelling and the ability to write is super critical in product because you got to be
Mhm.
able to tell people this is the product that we have, this is how it works. This is why it'll be meaningful to you. So there is content strategy related to it, but I'm not in PR, right? I'm a product leader, director of product. But I pivoted from this was my goal to come out and get my degree in that. But then I started doing some technology. And so I started working, leaned into my career for several years before going back to get my executive MBA. And it was because I got to a level where I said, I need to dive in deeper to finance a bit more. I
Mhm.
don't love numbers, but I knew that it was going to be so important for me to be in, in my last role as a head of product, to lead into a space of strategy. I got to understand financial impact. And so for me, that was a pivot. I was so good at what I did in my career. I didn't really need additional education. But I said, wait, the signal is telling me, Christine, in order to keep elevating up into your career, don't just get an MBA, but get an executive MBA because where you're trying to drive business is going to require something more. And so for me,
Right.
that was a pivot. I was so comfortable in the role I was doing. I was like, oh, now I'm gonna put myself under pressure to go back to school and to do an executive MBA with a kid and all the things. But I would say those are the signals that I look for. It is again, back to that self-awareness. Have I reached the ceiling of a level? And if the signal is saying
Mhm.
yes, it is, let's figure out how to break through. And that might
Right.
require additional education. That may require establishing a new relationship, getting a mentor, getting some executive coaching, something of those natures. So I would say looking for signals, which is, have I reached my max? If it's saying yes, then I need to do something more. Is kind of how I've looked at that.
Question for you. Now, when
Okay.
you're with your team, you're
Hmm.
you're you're leading them, and there's ambiguity because that happens, right? There's ambiguity sometimes, the fog, as we're talking about it, we're calling it the fog, uncertainty. How do you decide when to slow down, when to pause, or accelerate in those uncertain conditions?
Hmm. Oh, let's see.
Like, what methods do you use, or values, or just what's your signals? You use signals, you talked about values. What are some things, and you're leading the team. So how do
Hmm.
you know when to, let's slow down the pace, let's pick it up? or let's just pause for a minute. Let's just, kind of regroup.
Yeah, if we go back to, I would say like what we talked about in the beginning of that self-awareness piece.
Hmm.
Sharing for me, it's been sharing Christina's operating model, getting that from my direct reports, their operating model. That for me is critical because that gives me a good foundation to understand when does this person make their best decisions? When do I make my best decisions? And when I think about, when to slow down versus speed up, all those things matter. You have to take all that context into consideration because there could be days where, I can make quick decisions based on how I'm feeling and thinking. And I know that my team can make quick decisions. And then there are other points where it's like, no, we need to slow down. We need to slow down because the business is actually focused on um, there is a bigger thing that we need to focus on today, and so we need to put all this other stuff. So we need to park and let other things. And so I think it's just first understanding, who you are, when do you work the best, understanding who others are, when they work the best, because you can just solve things faster. And then also you just have to be super sensitive of when to slow down. So most of, I know that's not a, ooh, aha answer, but a lot of it is just, understanding people a bit, understanding yourself. No, I'm not, when I'm tired, I don't need to make certain decisions. You know what I mean? It's not going to be good for me or for anybody. And so it might be, all right, let's put this on the shelf today. We'll get to it tomorrow, but let's put it on the shelf today. So I would say it's not, no magic there, but it's just like sometimes it just starts with being self-aware, understanding
Yeah,
who you're working with, how they like to work, and then make a decision based on that.
yeah. I mean, that will resonate with somebody. I don't think any answer is like, one size fits all.
Yeah,
It's based
yeah,
on
okay.
your experience and
Hmm.
how you would approach it, because I know sometimes we have to do that, but in making those decisions, especially when you're involved, your team is involved in the company, right? Because you're doing it for your company or your customer.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's huge. That's
Yeah.
heavy on you and your team. So you have to really, like you said, knowing where everybody is and what we're doing, making sure that everybody's good, that we can move on, or do we need to just pause for a minute, regroup?
You when you are refreshed, you're more alert. You can take a little bit focus effort into your work, but when you're tired, mistakes happen. And so
Yeah,
I've learned to not push people to their max, and
yeah,
I've learned to not allow being pushed to my max as well. To say, now's the time to speak up. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. And then I become the leader to say, hey, take a break. Go eat dinner. You
yeah,
haven't gotten up from your desk all day. Take a break. I like to do walking meetings. Sometimes I'm like, hey, put your earbuds in. Let's walk on our one-on-ones and talk and have a discussion rather than clicking at a computer all day. But yeah, those things matter. It's super important to
yeah. And hindsight, right? Because I know earlier in my career, I was one of those people that would work around the clock and have my team working, and I didn't know what I didn't know. I
yeah.
didn't I was a new leader. I didn't know that that wasn't healthy for anybody, as far as being productive or physical health, mental
Yeah.
health. I was unaware of all of that, and I had to learn that you need balance here. You can't just push, push, push all the time, go, 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 and think that you're doing something. And that's why I said,
Hmm.
how much work do you think you're getting done if you're working like that? You're not really,
Yeah, yeah.
you're
And on
just
the
there.
flip
You're not,
side, yeah.
yeah.
And on the flip side of that, when I started out, I was afraid to say something. I was afraid to
Mm,
say, I'm working too much, right? Because I was like, do, because I know that that's what the direction that was coming down. And I think, as you progress in your career, especially starting out as a man, before becoming a leader, starting out as a manager, you got to be able to speak up, to say, I'm tired, or I don't
hmm.
know how to do this. Those are the things that matter. And then
Yeah.
when you become a leader, you have to start speaking, advocating for others. You might have to say to C-suite level, the team has been working too hard. We reached our max. And so I think that's important to be able to first, yep, I don't know if balance is a real thing, but I'll like say, sometimes you're going to be doing a lot of this and less of that, but it's never going to be a perfect balance of anything. It's just, you're just doing a
No.
little bit more over here today than you were doing yesterday.
Right.
Um,
But you get to figure out what you need.
yeah.
And
Figure
then
out what you
it's
need.
okay if I
Yeah.
need to do this, if I need to step away, if I need to leave early, if I need to go take a nap.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's
Or
gonna be there tomorrow. It's not going
right,
away.
right.
It'll
I need to
it'll
go
get
eat. I
done
need
when
to
it
go
gets
work
done.
out or
Yeah, yeah,
something. Take a
yeah,
like you said, take a walk. I need to
yeah.
go walk around the block and come back. So that
Hmm.
does matter. Is what advice would you give to emerging leaders who feel overwhelmed by uncertainty?
I would say overwhelmed, stop waiting to feel ready, I think is what I would say. You're not always gonna know all the answers. So just jump out there. Most leaders you admire didn't feel ready when they stepped into certain opportunities. They felt uncertain, they felt challenged, they felt uncomfortable. The difference is they moved anyway, and I think that's super important to do. Courage isn't just the absence of uncertainty. It's movement despite of uncertainty. Every
Mhm.
step forward becomes evidence that you can handle the next thing, and eventually that becomes confidence. So I would say that's my overarching advice to emerging leaders. You're not always going to be ready, but once you get in the thing, it's like, all right, it wasn't that bad. Now it could be bad, and then you might need to pivot. But I would say that's my big thing to emerging leaders is sometimes you gotta just leap. You gotta just leap. You don't know what you don't know until you get in the thing. And then also just have folks around you that can be that support. Your personal board of directors, I would say. Have people from different industries that can help you see things from a different perspective. So yeah, that's my overarching for emerging leaders. It is you're not always going to know all the answers. Nobody knows all the answers, but you got to make a decision and then move
Yeah,
forward with
yeah.
the information that you have.
Right. And my last question for you is when the fog finally lifts, what do
Mhm.
you hope your team says about how you led them through it?
Oh, I hope that my team says that she cared. Like she knew that I was nervous through the fog. She knew that I felt uncertain and didn't hold it against me. Didn't bring up, oh, this person didn't know this, but that I'm a leader that listens, that I'm thoughtful, that I want to collaborate and help people solve problems together. Even when I don't know, I like to share that I don't know, to be transparent and upfront with people. So that's what I would say. I want my team to know, she doesn't have all the answers and she's not afraid to say that she doesn't have all the answers, but we will figure it out together.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christina. And I really appreciate you sharing with us about leading through the fog. You've been listening to Growing Up the Age of Your Emotions podcast. Thank you for joining me for this conversation, along with Christina Cage, on Leading Through the Fog. If there's one truth I hope you carry with you, it's this: uncertainty is not a reflection of your inadequacy, it's a reflection of your humanity. And emotional maturity isn't about eliminating the fog, it's about learning to move with intention inside it. Every unclear moment is shaping your emotional age as a leader. Every imperfect decision is strengthening your resilience. Every step you take, even the hesitant ones, is evidence of your growth. If this episode supported you, share it with someone who's navigating their own fog. And remember, leadership development isn't about becoming flawless. It's about becoming more aware, more grounded, and more aligned with who you're growing into. Until next time, keep evolving, keep choosing courage, and keep honoring the emotional age you're stepping into. This is Dr. Melanie Empowers, and you've been listening to Growing Up the Age of Your Emotions podcast.
Thank you for having me.